Recognize the gentleman from Montana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chazen, coming from a water-related area, I've got to believe that the fish and seafood industry and tourism all sort of tie into your local economy as well, do they not?
Yeah, we provide about 20% of the nation's seafood. And I think if you come to any restaurant in Washington, D.C. or around this area, you're eating a blue crab from Lafourche Parish.
So if you were to estimate, or you maybe even have this, how much of your parish's budget actually comes from either tourism related to the water activities or from the fish and seafood industry?
Probably about 20%. About 28% of our parish is made up of oil and gas, and the rest is made up of household earning incomes.
Okay, so it would be a pretty big hit to your budget, I would say, if you were to lose your tourism and or your fish and seafood industry. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, and that's why you've seen us invest so much in ecotourism. That's why you've seen places like Port Fourchon develop kayak launches and kayak paths through their facilities. That's why you've seen the parish invest over the last 3.5 years about $5 million in new boat launch facilities and upgrades to help our charter fisher captains, to help our recreational fishermen who are coming from places north of us that want to get to the Gulf more easily to fish, and it's proven to be an economic boom for us.
Very good. And so I would imagine as you have conversations in your community with the oil and gas industry, which I'm sure that you do, that the fact that you are so reliant also on the fisheries and the tourism certainly enters into that conversation so that everybody is working together.
Yeah, and I think that's why you've seen some of the majors invest in so many wetland restoration projects, why we partner with things like NAWCA, the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, to not only focus on the fishing industry, but also the waterfowl habitat, to get hunters to come down as well. As those migratory bird patterns change, we know that our wetlands are a huge part of that. So to be able to rebuild that and not only to expand the hunting aspect, but also to protect our culture. You know, I like to go fishing in the same places in Montague and Dulac and Pontiac that my dad took me fishing. I'd love to take my 2 little girls there one day when they get old enough and they actually want to get on a boat and go fishing. So I think that's why you've seen us invest. We're in about a 12th year of a partnership with the oil and gas industry. We've developed over 200,000 linear feet of wetland terraces that help waterfowl habitat. We've rebuilt somewhere about 500 acres of wetland marsh habitat. We've partnered with people like Nicholls State University, which is our university closest to the coast here in Lafourche Parish, and our new Coastal Wetland Center to be able to do things like that.
Very good. I mean, I myself traveled down to New Orleans probably 15, 20 years, 18 years ago, and went fishing off of a rig. So it seems to me that they were attracting a lot of fish, not certainly hurting the habitat. Mr. Dan also, or Mr. Menarvik, from the time that you lease until the time you actually get a permit, before discounting actual drilling operations, get the lease till you get a permit to actually drill. What kind of time frame are we looking at, roughly?
I mean, that varies. You know, when we lease a block, you know, we have 5 to 10 years to develop that block before the lease expires. So it really is driven by our decision on when to really submit that permit. But the whole process of permitting for a new lease, you know, probably could be done in a year. So you have to plan ahead and make sure you have it. But it's pretty well-established procedures.
And how much of the lease do you actually end up finding that is developable for a resource as opposed to that you just end up leasing anyway just because it's part of the block, and then you sort of determine what is the best area to go?
You know, typically the blocks are in the Gulf of Mexico are 5,000-acre blocks around there, and, you know, depending on the reservoir size that you're targeting, how many reservoirs and everything, it varies greatly. But, you know, it's a percentage of the total block. It's, you know, quarter or half of the total
That's what I was going to say. So but anywhere from 20 up to, if it's a really good block, you might get 50% of that area that's developable. Okay, and then the permit to actually drill from there to production, when you're actually drilling, what kind of time frame are we dealing with there?
It's really widely varying depending on water depth, really. You know,
Okay.
The deeper the water, it could take years to establish production if you're going to put in a full facility. If you're going to tie that well back to an existing facility, be a lot less, and if it's on the shelf in the shallow water, it can be very quickly.
So my last question before I run out of time here is, we've seen the prohibition by this administration of the leasing and to stop the leasing so that we can't even begin the research. Are you also finding that you're having problems with the permits to do the drilling or being slow walked as well?
I think that was a concern, honestly, when the Biden administration came in, but from our company's perspective, the permits have been slow with regard to pipelines and decommissioning and things like that, but generally the well drilling permits have been pretty standard response times.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.